very difficult to study, and there's not much incentive to do this research. Oh. Oh, Canada. Good question. Yeah. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know exactly the rules there, but I know Europe seems to have the most advanced and knowledgeable approach to toxins, would be my opinion. So, okay, yeah, and feel free to stop me and ask questions as I'm going through. Just raise your hand. Happy to stop and answer questions. I know I'm going to be covering a lot of information. So first, talking about water. So you might not think about water as a source of toxins, but it potentially could be. So, for example, there was a U.S. Department of Agriculture study that found more than 50 million Americans had some agricultural chemicals or pesticide contamination in the water. And more than 40 million they had pharmaceuticals that were found, like antibiotics, other drugs, even psychiatric medicines. This occurs because a lot of people flush unused pills down the toilet, just to get rid of them. And many of the municipal water plants are not set up to filter out these pharmaceuticals. So that's present as well. So other toxins like perchlorate and PFAs were found. And we'll talk about, filtering the drinking water, which is the obvious solution to this. But first, this is a quote from Douglas Kerr, who's an autoimmune disease researcher. And I want to highlight the second paragraph, which is that most of the risk of autoimmunity comes from environmental exposures rather than genetic susceptibilities. So the good news is that means it's within our control. It's within the environment. These are things we can modify. So in my book, The Tiger Protocol, I review 20 toxins that have each individually been linked to increased risk of autoimmune disease. But when we start combining toxins, there's actually a synergistic effect where the combined effect can be greater than the effect of just one toxin on its own. So, for example, there's a synergistic interaction between heavy metals and pesticides. So heavy metals includes lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, a few like these, which can be found in the environment. And then pesticides are agricultural chemicals. But when both were present, there was a significantly higher level of cell damage than when each was present individually. So there's an additive effect to these toxins. And so is this really relevant? Because maybe we don't carry that many toxins. What is kind of the average? So this was a study which was designed to look at the average American. It was done in the US. And in this case, none of the study subjects had any occupational or residential risks for toxins. They were not factory workers. They didn't live near a toxic waste site. They didn't have any known risk factors. They were trying to capture just average people in the US. And what they found was there were more than 100 toxins elevated per person, and a total of 155 toxins, including many of these listed here, like the heavy metals, PCBs, other industrial compounds. So the data is clear that the prevalence of toxins is pretty high, just in average people. And the good news is, all our bodies have detox ability. We've got detox capacities. We'll talk about how to strengthen that. That's the ultimate goal, I believe. And it's true in kids as well. So when they've done research in newborns, they've found an average of about 200 toxins as well. So that's why in pediatric populations, we're also seeing a lot of autoimmune diseases. And then this slide is a bit technical, but I'll explain what is listed here. So on the left are what are called obesogens and diabetogens. So these are toxins that promote obesity. And diabetes. So in the autoimmune disease community, we call them autogens because they promote autoimmune disease. But the same toxins that are all listed here, like the BPA, phthalates, PFOA, PCBs, all of these. So the same toxins that disrupt the immune system also drive obesity, and they lead to all those in the middle column, all of those factors like the elevated insulin, glucose intolerance, insulin resistance, fatty liver, elevated cholesterol. So I think toxins are really contributing to all of these factors that are not being attributed to toxins. And then they can lead in the third column to the actual diseases, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. And so I think addressing toxins not only reduces risk of autoimmune disease, but also reduces risk of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. And so it's really very crucially important. Now, I want to acknowledge that this might be overwhelming to hear about all of these, these toxins, but the goal here is to empower you with this information. The goal is not to live a toxin-free life, nor do we have to, because we have our detox organs. It's impossible to live in a bubble. None of us are going to need to completely avoid exposure, but we can reduce exposure to toxins and then enhance the detox abilities, and that is very powerful, as we will see. So there's research about cases where this approach has really helped resolve certain diseases. So in one case, a woman with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease, had a complete resolution of symptoms after a year of chelation therapy, removed high levels of a heavy metal called cadmium from her system. And then in another case, a patient with multiple sclerosis who was treated for many years with regular medications but not able to get better, he was found to have elevated levels of mercury, lead, and aluminum in urine testing. So testing for heavy metals in blood is okay, but urine is probably a better way, more accurate way to test. And then in his case, treatment led to improvement of symptoms and remission in the multiple sclerosis. So let's go on to talk about the eye, the infections. So there's different types of infections: bacteria, mycobacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. So tonight I'm going to be talking a lot more about bacteria in the microbiome. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about some other organisms. So mycobacteria are known for tuberculosis, so globally that's the most well-known mycobacteria, but there's others like the MAP bacteria, which are involved in autoimmune disease. And one thing that is involved is called molecular mimicry, which is basically when the antibodies produced by the immune system against this MAP bacteria cross-react with the proteins in the body, like on the pancreas, and then attack the pancreas. So that's a common mechanism in autoimmune diseases. And these MAP bacteria can sometimes survive pasteurization, so in milk and dairy products. And this is thought to be one of the theories why dairy intake, like milk intake in kids in a certain age, is correlated with the development of type 1 diabetes in childhood. So it may not be the milk itself, it could be the MAP bacteria in the milk. And this is probably a good time to talk about my general view on dairy, because I was asked a lot of questions about that. I didn't talk about dairy last night in my talk about diet. So is dairy inflammatory for everyone? No, I don't believe so. There's no one-size-fits-all approach with nutrition, and dairy products are the same. So my approach is, well, first, it does depend on your Ayurvedic body type. So are people familiar with the basics of Ayurveda, like the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha? No, I see some people. Okay. But, well, basically, there's 3 doshas or forces in the body. Vata you can think of as wind, Pitta as fire, and Kapha as earth. And every one of us is born with a primary dosha, primary body type, and then a secondary dosha. So if your primary dosha is kapha, the earth, it's generally recommended not to have dairy, except for ghee, but it's recommended to really limit dairy. So if you are vata and pitta, then you might be able to have dairy. But what I recommend is actually testing it out, so eliminating it for a period of time and then reintroducing dairy products one at a time and see how your body responds. And you have to reintroduce them differently because there's so many different types of dairy. So start with the ghee, start with butter, and then every week or 2 you try a different dairy product, then yogurt, then cheese, and then potentially milk at the very end. But you have to really test that and then see how your body responds. And usually your body will tell you, give you clues. If you've eliminated food for some time and then you bring it back, see how you respond. And then for some people, dairy can be very beneficial, source of calcium, especially fermented dairy like yogurt, kefir. It's got the good bacteria that are really good. So I think, yeah, it's important to test your individual response because there's no like universal rule for diet or for dairy specifically. Oh, yes.
Do you believe that your body can kind of give you a message that something is not good for you just intuitively?
Yes.
Or muscle testing? Muscle testing?
Muscle. Yeah, I think so. I'm not as familiar with that, but possibly. Yes. Yes.
Break is enough to reintroduce before reintroducing dairy?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So at least 4 weeks. If you can do 6 weeks, is probably even better. But that range, 4 to 6 weeks of elimination. Yep. Oh, yes.
Sheep and goat milk cheeses are tolerated better when seeing that the cow's milk would be
Yes,
worse.
exactly. Yeah, so that's, yeah. So in my book, I have like a detailed reintroduction guide, and that's what I talk about. Like, so the sheep's milk and goat's milk yogurt has less casein, which is the protein that some people react to, than cow's milk. So you should always reintroduce like sheep's milk cheese, then goat's milk cheese, and then cow's milk cheese. Yeah, it's a good point. Yes.
Dairy substitutes like soy or almond or oat milk.
Oh,
Or, I mean, soy in general.
fine.
Maybe that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, no, I don't have any issue generally with soy. And all of those you mentioned, almond milk, oat milk, I think they're fine. For people who react to dairy, I don't see any issue with those. If you can make your own, that's probably ideal, just to avoid all the additives and things in the commercial products. But I generally no issue with soy milk, almond milk, oat milk. My problem is more the added sugars. A lot of the when you try to get it in the stores. Yeah. All right, so so that's just about dairy. And then this is just to say that the same bacteria also were found in inflammatory bowel disease, which is another type of autoimmune disease. So let's go on to talk about candida. So candida is a yeast or fungus that is also in the body in normal amounts in all of us. But if it overgrows, so in this case, overgrowth of different candida was associated with higher odds of developing multiple sclerosis. So are people familiar with candida? Have you guys heard of candida? As a seems like yes. Okay. So the other thing, yeah, candida is also being studied in Crohn's disease as well as celiac disease, which is a sensitivity to gluten. That's an autoimmune disease. So, with candida, you see a lot of information online that you can do these tests with, like testing your saliva or just based on symptoms. It is true, like a white coating on the tongue can be, like if it's a thick white coating that does not go away, that can be a sign of candida. Could be a sign of other things as well. But the best way and most reliable way is actually to test for candida, which we can test now with stool tests, potentially other form of tests. If you see a more of a naturopathic or integrative doctor, they can test for candida. So I always tell people, don't assume based on symptoms or those online tests you read about that you have candida and you need to go on a candida cleanse and do all this stuff. Better get tested first. But what's the biggest food that feeds candida? Sugar, yeah, exactly. So as you all know, yeah, it's mostly the processed, white sugar. But then if I am treating someone for candida, I'll also have them avoid dairy, gluten, other few other things. But sugar is really the biggest one. So keeping sugar intake low, it doesn't have to be zero, but keeping it low is important. Because candida is a normal yeast. It's present in all of us. It's not causing any issues. Only if it overgrows, that's when it's problematic. Okay, now we're going to go on talk about the gut. Tonight, I'm going to be doing an entire talk on the microbiome, but briefly, these are the 40 trillion bacteria in our gut. So we have also 40 trillion human cells. So we're 50% bacterial, 50% human. And we have 23,000 human genes, but more than 1 million bacterial genes in the gut. And 60% of the immune system is physically in the gut, which is why gut health is so important for immune health as well. There's this condition called increased intestinal permeability, also called leaky gut, which is a factor in a lot of diseases. How many people have heard of leaky gut? Oh, quite a few. Okay, so it's a very knowledgeable audience. That's great. Okay, so in autoimmune disease, these are some of the common findings. The leaky gut, reduced diversity of the microbiome, and then dysbiosis, which I'm going to talk about in this next slide here. So the gut is all about balance, so when you have a balanced microbiota on the left, you've got plenty of the beneficial bacteria, and they outgrow those harmful or opportunistic bacteria. So you don't need to eradicate them. You don't need zero harmful bacteria. Usually they're just kept in check by the good bacteria. They don't cause any problem then. But if you shift to the right, when you have dysbiosis from either, it could be from antibiotics or high sugar diet, for example, or high processed food, high fat. Also being sedentary is a factor. So physical activity affects the gut microbiome quite a bit. But then when you get into the dysbiosis on the right, then you have a decline in those beneficial bacteria, and those harmful bacteria can start to overgrow. And then you see all of those consequences listed on the lower right, like the leaky gut, inflammation. So whenever you have the dysbiosis, you have gut inflammation, and that always leads to some other inflammation systemically because the gut and the body are so closely linked, and also contributes to diabetes, weight gain, fatty liver. Again, another cause of fatty liver is a dysbiosis in the bacteria. And another thing we see in autoimmune diseases is a reduced amount of the good bacteria. So on the bottom, the 4 bacteria are listed there: Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, E. coli, and Enterococcus. And only the first 2 are the beneficial bacteria, Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus. So in this particular disease, which is called autoimmune hepatitis, or AIH, when you progress in the disease, so the color coding from blue to green and gray is the disease progressing and getting worse. So if you look under Bifidobacterium, you see that those bacteria gradually decline, and same with the Lactobacillus as the disease is getting worse. But with E. coli and Enterococcus, which are not those good bacteria, they're staying the same. So it seems like the good bacteria are progressively declining during the disease progression. And then you also see a increase in the leaky gut at the same time. So when you go on the left in blue from healthy control to then the autoimmune normal liver function, then abnormal, and then cirrhosis, which is like a serious liver condition, then you see that increase in the leaky gut. So this is measured on the left, something called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. This is a compound that is found in the gut, not supposed to be in the blood. So when it gets into the bloodstream, like the plasma LPS, you know there's a leaky gut because it's not supposed to be in the blood at all. So, but the higher that goes, the more inflammation there is in the body, and the more the disease has progressed in this case. And I think this is true with many of the common chronic diseases. The leaky gut is a big driver of inflammation.
Sorry, what's the blood test?
Oh, it's called a LPS, lipopolysaccharide, and it's not a standard blood test. But you can have it done through like a naturopath or more of an integrative holistic doctor. Yep. So. And then we've been talking about these 5 causes as separate, but there definitely is interaction between them. So, for example, phthalate exposure altered the microbiome in newborns and also changed their immune responses. And then glyphosate, the pesticide, also has antibiotic effects. So when the company was first bringing glyphosate to the market, it was marketed as an antibiotic. But then they found that it was a very poor antibiotic because it only kills the good bacteria. It doesn't really kill the harmful bacteria at all. So then the company pivoted and they found, oh, it's a pesticide. So it was then switched to be marketed as a pesticide. but it hasn't lost those properties, the antibiotic properties. Again, this is like, not to alarm you, but in low doses, over time, this has an effect, which is why we recommend eating organic, trying to limit like the pesticide exposure. Okay, let's talk a little bit about eating. I break it up into the phase 1 and phase 2 diet. So the phase 1 diet is more of an elimination diet. So like we were talking about for dairy, I recommend starting with an elimination diet if you're trying to figure out which foods you're reacting to or which foods are causing inflammation. So eliminating gluten, dairy, sugar, potentially other things. And then you can bring in foods to heal the gut, fermented foods, prebiotic foods, etc. And usually at least about 4 weeks, if you can do 6 weeks, and then shift to the phase 2, which is the reintroduction, where you're going to bring back the foods one at a time every week or so, and then keep a journal, keep track of how you're reacting to different foods. But one food that's excellent to bring in the beginning, in the phase 1 diet, are the broccoli sprouts. So how many people eat broccoli sprouts regularly? Okay, good. Yeah, so great. So this is the richest food source of sulforaphane, this very beneficial compound, which we'll talk about. But we know broccoli is a very healthy, obviously, but broccoli sprouts have 100 times as much sulforaphane as broccoli. So it's very concentrated. And a good way to increase this sulforaphane if you're cooking just broccoli or cauliflower, all those excellent cruciferous vegetables, is add a source of this enzyme, mustard seed powder. So there was a study where they added 1 gram of just brown mustard powder to cooked broccoli, and then the absorption of the sulforaphane increased by 400%. So if you're cooking, broccoli, cauliflower, any cruciferous vegetable, just add a source of that myrosinase enzyme, and mustard seed powder is a good way to boost the absorption of the sulforaphane. And this is important because there's more than 2,000 studies on sulforaphane showing how it reduces inflammation, boosts your immune system in a good way, enhances your brain function, really important for brain health. It's a great antioxidant, and also antimicrobial as well, getting rid of the bad bugs that we don't want. So a little bit about rest, the R in the I.G.E.R protocol. So basically, stress is a major cause for the initial occurrence of autoimmunity, and also driving flare-ups and exacerbations, and also many other chronic diseases. We know stress plays a role in heart disease, diabetes. Stress can promote weight gain through cortisol, so obesity. So it's been found to be involved in the development and progression of almost all autoimmune diseases, and it's a huge driver of inflammation. And studies show addressing stress does improve outcomes. So in this case, they looked at patients with rheumatoid arthritis, and they learned mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, which is a program where you learn techniques, meditation, mindfulness practice. And over 6 months, there was a significant drop in depression and improved well-being, improved physical symptoms as well. And then another study in inflammatory bowel disease found that 9 weeks of mindfulness meditation changed the expression of genes involved in inflammation, cell growth, oxidative stress. So meditation is not just having a mental effect, it's having a physical effect. It's changing your genes, what we call epigenetics, which is how the genes are expressed. And now we're understanding how powerful meditation really is on a gene level. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the part 2, which is how to address the toxins, work on infections, heal the gut, eating right, and then some tools for optimizing rest. So first we'll go back to Maria, the patient I talked about. So she was struggling with obesity, fatty liver, psoriasis, and I also do an Ayurvedic assessment on some of my patients. So she was a classic kapha body type as well. And so I had her eliminate dairy. That was one of the things in terms of diet. And then we added her on neem, which is an Ayurvedic herb that is an antimicrobial to get rid of yeast and bacterial overgrowth. And then we use some of these prebiotic foods which feed the good bacteria. Especially certain red-colored foods are very good. The red quinoa, red rice, pomegranate, and cranberry. And so those are very beneficial for a kind of bacteria called Akkermansia, which is the main bacteria for metabolism, and also one of the bacteria for inflammation. So I did a stool test on her. So we looked at her microbiome, and she had bacterial overgrowth initially that then resolved, and her good bacteria were better. Her leaky gut was normalizing. Something called short-chain fatty acids was improving. That's a metabolic marker of the gut bacteria. So all of her gut markers were better. And then what she found was that previously ineffective weight loss strategies began to work. And that's what the studies show. When you can improve that microbiome with the Akkermansia bacteria, then any diet will work better. Any attempt to lose weight will work better. Her blood sugar, blood pressure improved. Liver enzymes became normal. And then finally, the psoriasis responded to those topical steroids, and her condition improved. So the first step in terms of toxins is to reduce exposure. So choose organic whenever possible. And then options for filtering your drinking water. So if you want something portable, I recommend the Zero, Z-E-R-O brand, which is Zero is a portable water pitcher, similar to the Brita and those kind of like water pitchers, except that they've done third-party testing and found the Zero seems to be about the best, better than the other brands. And it's about the same price, about $40 for a pitcher. That's a good way to filter the water. If you are at home and can install something in the house, then a reverse osmosis system, or RO reverse osmosis, is a good technology as well. A bit more expensive, in the range of $250, but that's more of a permanent. They install something under your sink, and then you have a faucet that gives you that water. So generally, I recommend not having too much water in plastic bottles. Of course, when you're traveling, that's fine. But at home, I recommend just getting the tap water, filtering it with a good water filter.
Sorry.
Yes.
With the reverse osmosis, would you recommend the mineralization as well, or not?
Generally, no. Yeah, because that's also a common misconception, I think, that you have to add minerals back, because reverse osmosis is still, it's not distilled water. There's still like a small amount of minerals, and then also in general, the amount of minerals we get from food in our diet is so much higher than whatever is in water that it's not going to cause an imbalance if you don't remineralize them. So, yes. No, no. Yeah, it does get rid of it does get rid of like bacteria, parasites, things like that, but not toxins. But a basic filter will do it. Yes.
Good question. Is reverse osmosis versus natural spring water?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
is there a benefit to having one or both?
Yeah, well, I think 100 years ago I would have opted for the spring water, but just with the way our environment is now, I can't be as sure about the quality. So if it's like a very well-tested source, good spring water, that would be fine. I think the challenge is finding that now, so that's why. But either one would be okay. Yes.
What do you think about the Berkey water filter?
Oh, good. That's a very good option. Yeah. Berkey, B-E-R-K-E-Y. That's another brand that she was asking about, which is good. Yes.
You spoke about the spring water, but I live in the state of
Florida.
and a majority of our water is through well water. Is there a recommendation for the well water?
So I recommend having it tested, and then also just filtering it with a reverse osmosis system should be safe and good way to do it. Yes.
I had a question about back to the cruciferous and the mustard.
Yeah.
So does it have to be ground mustard, or is that just all they tested with it? And is it yellow
Yeah.
mustard or black mustard seed or?
Yeah, it does have to be ground so that the powders can get in among the vegetables. And they only tested the brown mustard seed powder, but I would think the other kinds should work because they do have the same enzyme. But all All right, and then opening windows. So it's important to regularly dust and have air exchange at home because that will get rid of any airborne toxins in the house, anything from cleaning chemicals and so forth. And then also removing the shoes is a very good practice because also they've studied that and found that the bottoms of shoes from just walking around outside in the world picks up things like lead, pesticides, and harmful bacteria. So there's a reason why, in the Indian and East Asian cultures, they remove the shoes at the door because not for this reason, but it's additional benefit. And then I do recommend not handling paper receipts too much because they might have BPA. Choose electronic receipts or just handle them briefly. They've studied cashiers who handle the receipts all day and found they have higher levels of BPA because it absorbs through the skin. So if you just reduce the amount of time you spend handling it, that will be adequate. BPA is another common toxin, bisphenol A, that is found in plastic, like plastic, different sources, and then also the receipts, paper receipts that you get in the grocery store. And the good news, oh, yes, go ahead.
Talk about the effect of microplastics.
Yeah, microplastics, definitely very important. So I think we can't get to zero exposure, but I think they are present in water that is, in plastic water bottles. Obviously I'm drinking water right here, so you can't be extreme about it. But yes, that's why I recommend most of the water at home should be not in plastic. And then you definitely don't want to heat food in plastic. That will release microplastics. I recommend glass containers. Recently I heard that sea salt, unfortunately, might have a high level of microplastics because of the oceans, the way the oceans have so much plastic now. Yeah, so go with the Himalayan salt. I think that should be fine. But, yeah.
Quick question, my Brita filter, I
Yeah.
always wondered about this. My Brita filter pitcher is plastic.
Right.
So I've always had a question about, I am filtering my water, but that's like the only plastic I have in the house.
Oh.
Is that bad?
No. I mean, I think that the benefits far outweigh anything negative about the plastic, and the harder the plastic, the less likely it is to release those. So you see these bottles are pretty flimsy, but a Brita filter is pretty solid. So I think that should be okay. Yeah. So the good news is studies show that if you make these changes, your body can start eliminating toxins pretty quickly. So switching to a mostly organic diet lowered pesticide levels in the urine by 80% in about 5 days. And then switching to personal care products, so cosmetics and soaps and things without phthalates, parabens, and triclosan lowered levels by 45% in just 3 days. And then hand washing, especially before meals, and removing dust in the home, vacuuming and so forth, lowered flame retardants in the urine by 43% in just 1 week. So these are often found in furniture, and they accumulate in the house dust. So that's why vacuuming and keeping dust low, hand washing is so beneficial.
Is it a typo that says with 5 blades and
Well, it's avoiding the products that have those.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so as long as you take them out, yeah, exactly. All right. And then don't forget what I call the pre-tox, which are the preconditions for detox. So hydration is very important. So at least 1 to 2 liters of water every day. That's critical. And daily elimination. So the way your body detoxifies is the liver packages toxins and then excretes them into the bile, which goes into the stool, and then the body eliminates them that way. So having at least 1 or 2 bowel movements every day, this is the important condition for detox. And then sweating. Sweating is very important. That's the way the body was designed to detoxify. And there's a lot of research now on saunas, very beneficial. I highly recommend them. So sweating in saunas was found to excrete lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, pesticides, flame retardants, BPA, phthalates, and PCBs. And so those come out in the sweat. So you'd want to take a shower, right after, because you're washing that off the skin. And there was a study compared sweating in a sauna to sweating from exercise, because I have a lot of patients say, you know, hey, I went running, I got worked up a good sweat, you know, isn't that good enough? But in this study, they compared the sweating from exercise to the sweating from a sauna and found that they're different. The sweating in a sauna is much better for excreting toxins. And the reason for that is that many of these toxins are stored in the subcutaneous fat, which is just below the skin. So when the body is heated externally, it releases a lot of those toxins below the skin into the sweat. Whereas when the body is heated internally, like running or exercising, it's not as effective at pushing out those toxins. I mean, huge fan of exercise, obviously, very beneficial, but try to do both exercise and sweating.
With bath bathing, like hot tub, spring bath tub?
Yep. Hot baths. Yeah, so I think as long as if it's getting hot enough that you're really like sweating quite a lot, then yes, I do think so. I think some of the jacuzzis, they're not that hot, so you're not sweating that much. Yeah, yeah. If it's a very hot bath, yes, that will help. Yes.
Wood-fired sauna or an electric heated sauna versus an infrared sauna?
So they've actually studied that, and doesn't appear to be a difference. So all are good. Yeah, dry sauna, infrared sauna, wood-fired sauna, steam sauna, they all seem to work. So that's, yes.
Do you recommend binders to help eliminate while you're, you know, spirulina or chlorella or other, I don't know, binders?
Yes, or charcoal. Yeah, so that's more of an advanced strategy. But with my patients, yeah, if I'm seeing them, then I will sometimes put them on binders, like as you mentioned, like chlorella is excellent. Potentially activated charcoal, although you never want to take that near like food because then it'll bind. So we're talking about binders, which are basically things that bind. You take them orally, and then they bind toxins that are excreted, you know, into the stool by the liver, so they don't get reabsorbed, and that's a beneficial strategy. But again, you know, this is all coming out through the sweat, so you don't need binders because as long as you wash off the sweat, you'll still be detoxing quite a lot.
I've understood to wipe off the sweat before getting out
Yes.
to the air.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You mentioned earlier about the pathway from the liver to the gallbladder.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a gallbladder, what's the deal?
No change in detox because because the liver will store the bile, and then if you don't have a gallbladder, it will still package all the toxins in the bile, and then it'll go directly into the intestine. So you don't lose any of the detox effect. I mean, there's maybe digestive effects that change, but not for detox. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, Epsom salt, great. Yeah, I think, yeah, because they're high in magnesium and other minerals, very good for, I think probably better for muscle fatigue, soreness, relaxation. I think the main thing is really the temperature. As long as it's a very hot bath, that will be enough to trigger the detox. So everyone, at least 20 minutes per time is what I recommend. Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I generally do. So, so in Ayurveda, triphala is a great herb to help with regularity if you are not able to eliminate every day. I prefer triphala, yeah, Triphala. Triphala is Sanskrit is three fruits. Tri is three, and then phala is fruit. So triphala is made from haritaki, bibitaki, and amalaki. So three fruits that are dried and made into a powder that are very good for helping elimination, but also very good for detoxification, excellent antioxidants, a lot of benefits. So rather than a commercial like a stool softener or drug, I would go more with triphala or something like that. Oh, Okay, so yeah, I did want to talk about glutathione. So this is something also that can help with the detox. This is very beneficial for the liver, and also glutathione is the main antioxidant. It's called a master antioxidant. So most of the time, I recommend getting all your nutrients through food, but there are cases where supplements can have value and be beneficial. So glutathione is one of them. So what I generally do in my practice is we can test a glutathione blood level, and then if a person's low, then we can try to bring it up. And glutathione in autoimmune disease is very important because of there's something called oxidative stress, which is higher in autoimmune disease and chronic illness, and that lowers the antioxidants and lowers glutathione. And there's two forms, the liposomal and the reduced. So first, we talk about the liposomal. So this is a form package inside what's called a liposome, which is a fat-based molecule which boosts absorption. So this is a one version of supplementation called liposomal glutathione, which works. And then less expensive is another form called reduced glutathione or L-glutathione. This also works. It helps raise the levels of glutathione. There was a randomized placebo-controlled trial finding that this reduced glutathione was effective at raising the body levels and also reducing that oxidative stress, which is that inflammation.
Is there a preferred method for the recital glutathione for the soft gels or the pump version of this?
Oh, you mean like the topical versus the...
Yeah, versus, yeah. Is there
Um,
evidence?
I think so. All of these studies were oral, just with the oral forms. They seem to work. Yeah, I think there should be no problem with the topical either. But yeah.
And is there a time range that you would suggest to absorb it before eating, I guess? That to take
Oh.
your liposomal glutathione?
I think it actually works pretty well with meals. You don't have to do it on an empty stomach because of the packaging with the liposome. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Yes.
Is this just something you find like in a health food store? Or
Yes, yeah. Glutathione can be found. Another way to raise glutathione is take the precursor, which is NAC, N-acetylcysteine. That's also commonly sold in health food stores. And then if you want to do it through diet, there are ways too, which we'll talk about. So getting selenium, so Brazil nuts, that is very beneficial for raising glutathione. You also need vitamin C. So these are all the cofactors if you want to do it through foods. So, oranges, citrus, getting a lot of the vitamin C is very beneficial. And then the cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli, anything sulfur-rich. So broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, garlic, all those sulfur-rich nutrients are essential for making glutathione. So you can try to raise it through those foods, Brazil nuts, the sulfur-rich foods especially, and then vitamin C. Those are the main dietary factors that are effective as well at helping your body produce more of the glutathione. Okay, now to talk about the eye, the infections. So the goal is to, this is also very much the Ayurvedic approach, which is make the body terrain inhospitable to pathogens. Don't focus on the pathogen. Don't focus, obviously we're not recommending, antibiotics or drugs to kill the specific bacteria, yeast, parasite. Just make the body inhospitable and then the body will take care of itself. It will handle the infections. And one of the good ways the body does this is something called acidic intestinal pH. So we're talking only about the large intestine. And so pH, as you know, is like there's either alkaline or basic or acidic. So that's the general definition. And every different part of the body has a different optimal pH. So I'm not talking about the whole body. I'm not talking about, systemic pH or blood pH. Only talking about large intestine, and in that case, you want it to be acidic. You want it to be below 7. And that limits the growth of candida, of harmful bacteria, of parasites. And the main way your body produces that is with these short-chain fatty acids made by the good bacteria. And they produce that when you take in fiber. So we're going to talk about some fibers that are beneficial. And then also fermented foods have some of these organic acids, lactic acid, acetic acid, sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles, things with vinegar. All of these do have benefit for the gut because of those organic acids. So I do recommend those. Yes.
There is a stigma around garlic. I see find Ayurveda. Can you talk to that?
Oh, you mean in terms of like the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic?
Inflammation.
Oh, well, no, I don't think there's any evidence that garlic causes inflammation. I think it is more for that reason. The sattvic foods, and it's generally it's not it's considered a tamasic food. So I think if you are very involved in deep spiritual practice and you find that certain foods impair that, then maybe garlic should be avoided for that reason. But it's more of a spiritual reason rather than a physical. There's no evidence in science that garlic causes inflammation. On the contrary, if you can tolerate it, if you can eat it, I think it's beneficial. Okay, and I know fermented foods as well. I know that in Ayurveda there's controversies that some Ayurvedic doctors don't advise fermented foods. I also think it's more not necessarily a physical reason, but more like subtle energies. They are if someone has a pitta body type, so fire body type, then too much sour foods can aggravate pitta. So that's another reason why they might say to limit fermented foods. But outside of that, I don't think that fermented foods are harmful in any way. And then, adding in some of the antimicrobial spices and herbs. So with garlic, one tip to get more benefit from it is if you crush or mince the garlic and then wait 10 minutes or ideally 15 minutes, the active ingredients will be synthesized during that time before you cook it. So the main active ingredient is allicin, and there's an enzyme in garlic that's activated when you crush it. So press, chop, mince, however way you crush the garlic, that starts the process. So we do that at the beginning of cooking, and then 15 minutes later, when hopefully it's time to add it in the recipe, then it's fine to cook with it. Whereas if you just like crush it and cook it right away, you're getting the flavor, but you're not getting as much of the allicin and all those active ingredients. And then black cumin, extremely powerful spice, also called Nigella sativa. How many people have used black cumin in their diet? Okay, great. So I find it's not as well known. It's different from regular cumin. It's pictured there it's like a black shiny seed. You can find it in Asian markets. Definitely, like an Indian grocery store will have it. Excellent anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, beneficial in Hashimoto's disease, which is a thyroid autoimmune disease. And the way I recommend for black cumin is just get a pepper grinder and then put the whole black cumin in there, and you just grind it just like you would grind black pepper whenever you're cooking or over any dish. It's really excellent for inflammation, very strong anti-cancer. So great way to be anti-cancer preventative. That's the same, yeah. Yes, exactly the same, yeah. Kalonji, Nigella, sativa, black cumin, yeah, it's all the same. Yeah.
Because to consume a day that it would have desired effect?
So with the so black cumin, I think a little bit goes a long way. So I think like half a teaspoon per day is a total. So if you had a couple meals with a quarter teaspoon of it per day, so that I think that would be enough. Yes, there is a question there.
Brown cumin like every day. I'm just wondering, should I replace the brown cumin with the black cumin, or does brown cumin have no, antimicrobial value, or?
Oh, no, I mean, regular cumin is great. Yeah, so in my first book, I wrote about like 12 spices that are very healing. Cumin is one of them, and black cumin is also on the list. So do both. Yeah, put both if you can. They have very different flavors, though, even though they both have the name cumin. Yeah, so. Oh, yes.
I guess you're talking about 3 spices, so there is way more, like all kinds of
Yes.
spices.
buying the little bottle that already has cinnamon and all these other things.
Yes.
But it happened to me that you have the bottle version. How long can all those spices that are packaged?
Yep.
French herbs or I don't know, or Italian herbs.
Yes,
That kind
yes.
of stuff.
Yep.
Do they have? I know it's not the ideal, but have
Mhm.
them. Or how long can they last before they become any?
Well, ground spices, I would minimum 6 months they will last. I mean, the good thing about spices is they are antimicrobial, so they don't allow a lot of growth of bacteria and things. So I do agree that if you can get the whole spice and then grind it, it's better because it's more fresh and you get the active ingredients sooner. But you don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good, because it's still good to use ground spices if that's what you have. And yeah, the whole spices will last longer, like up to a year, but ground spices 6 months is what I tell people typically. And then ajwain, so this is also excellent seed, and it's a spice that's used a lot in Ayurveda. It stimulates the Agni, or the digestive fire. So if you've been to an Indian restaurant, near the cash register, there's usually a bowl with it has ajwain and fennel, because those are the two best digestive spices to help after you've had a heavy meal. You just chew on some of those ajwain seeds or fennel seeds, and then it helps your food to digest a lot better. And then turmeric, of course, we all know it's amazing, anti-inflammatory, but it's a very good antimicrobial. So it's got antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal effects. And then the anti-inflammatory effects are really powerful. So in this study with rheumatoid arthritis patients, they found that curcumin was equally effective as a medication, the anti-inflammatory drug diclofenac, at reducing pain in this disease. Excellent anti-inflammatory. So with curcumin, if you, so for general use, I recommend just cooking with turmeric, just as much as you can. Add some black pepper when you're cooking. That will help the absorption. Also, some ghee or other good fat will help absorption. But if you are trying to treat a systemic issue, like, say, joint pain or something, then it's better to take curcumin in a capsule, a supplement form. And these are some of the forms, because they get absorbed a lot more than the powder. The powder is low in absorption, but there's different forms like theracurmin. Long beta is another form that has 65 times the absorption of regular curcumin. There's curcumin and Novasol as well, which have up to 100 times absorption of regular curcumin. And these are not brand names. These are patented forms of the product that, if you look at the label, there's many brands that have each of these products. So if you look on the label and it says, okay, this is Novasol, or this is curcumin, then, or theracurmin, that's the way to find these products. They are widely sold, but you won't find them in the brand, like Long Vita is not a brand. It's an ingredient in many products. Yes, generally with curcumin, especially if it's in one of these forms, yeah, with food, it's absorbed just fine. Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, generally, I recommend always taking under supervision of a practitioner if you're taking supplements. There's no limit on spices, like cooking with turmeric or any of the other spices. So I would generally recommend, be under the supervision of a doctor, and then probably, if not, then I would say like 3 months is a good length of time. And then if you are finding benefit, then I would say take a break of at least a month, and then you can resume it. So it's like not a continuous, yeah, yes. I don't think temperature is a big factor, but if you were doing a smoothie, then the black pepper would really help the absorption. So it's not necessarily absorbed better from heating, but some fat does help. So maybe avocado, or but black pepper is the main thing to help the absorption. Oh, yeah. So I think with smoothies, more vegetables and less fruits because if you do too many fruits, then the sugar adds up very quickly. So you don't want it to be I would say definitely more vegetables than fruits. And then I think also eating them is definitely better. There's no doubt, but it's not bad to have them smoothied. There are juicers that will remove the fiber. I think that's not as good as a smoothie if you're keeping the fiber in a blender, just blending the whole thing, not discarding the fiber. That is better. There are juicers where they'll remove the pulp and the fiber. I don't think that's as good. But if it's a smoothie with the whole fiber ideally, also having some good fat and maybe protein in there, nuts and things. So I think that would be fine to have. Yeah. Oh, yes.
How does saliva smoothie because when you drink, there is not much of saliva interaction.
Right. Yeah. So, like I was saying, I think eating is definitely better. If you can take the time to eat those same fruits and vegetables, that's far preferred. But it's more like if you don't have time and the choices are either have a smoothie or don't have any vegetables, it's much better to have a smoothie than to not. So, yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, so they've actually studied that, and frozen, when you freeze like vegetables or fruits, they generally don't lose any of the vitamins or minerals, that's a effective way to incorporate those. Yep.
I've also understood in a smoothie that put nuts or some whole items in there so that your body is chewing it to trigger the body to see it as food.
Right, that could work.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Okay, so now we'll talk about the gut, healing the gut microbiome. So we're going to address the dysbiosis, we're going to heal the leaky gut, and then eating right to boost the diversity of the microbiome. So that's the phase 2 diet, and we're going to talk about the prebiotic foods as well. In terms of healing the gut, so bone broth is optional if it does have gut healing properties. But if you want to stick just with the vegetarian foods, then fermented foods, prebiotic foods. We're going to talk about certain prebiotic fibers. We're going to talk about. And then there are a couple of supplements that can be helpful. Glutamine is an amino acid that is very healing for the gut, well studied in leaky gut. It's available as a powder or in a capsule form. And then colostrum also has a gut healing property that does have a dairy origin. So if you have a sensitivity or other issue with dairy, you probably want to go more with the glutamine. But those can be helpful in terms of the gut healing, and in addition to the foods like the fermented foods and the prebiotic foods. And we talked about acidifying the intestine, how that's very important. And the best way to do that is a high-fiber diet with a diverse blend of plenty of plant fibers, which will be used by the good bacteria to produce these short-chain fatty acids. So those acids are what create the beneficial acidity, and the bacteria will use the fibers in foods. And so, but for additional fiber options, additional prebiotics, there's a couple of options I wanted to mention, which one is psyllium husk, and the other one is partially hydrolyzed guar gum. So these are both usually sold in powder form, additional fibers that are not absorbed, but they feed the good bacteria and they increase the production of those short-chain fatty acids. So that will acidify the intestine and lower the pH, which is what you want with the large intestine. So let's talk a little bit about psyllium. So this is a fiber product. It is sold in stores as Metamucil, but then you can also find it as unflavored, plain psyllium husk. It's used quite a lot in Ayurveda, actually, as well. It's called Sat Isabgol in Ayurveda. And it raises the levels of 3 beneficial bacteria groups, Lactospira rosiburia, Faecalibacterium, that produce butyrate, which is one of those short-chain fatty acids. That's very important. And then it also has systemic benefits like improving cholesterol, blood pressure, increasing fullness and satiety. So generally, whenever anything has gut benefits, there's going to be systemic benefits as well for the whole body because of how interconnected the body is with the gut and everything else. So besides psyllium, there's another fiber which is not as well known, so I like to talk about it. It's partially hydrolyzed guar gum. So this is made from the guar bean, which is a bean that was first found in India, and they grow the bean, they dry it, and they make this powder. It's hard to find in like the whole bean, but this fiber is widely available. Increases, again, those good bacteria, helps produce those short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and acetate. And for the PHGG, there's a patented form called sun fiber, which is a good form that also has these systemic benefits like regulating blood sugar, lowering cholesterol, promoting satiety and fullness. So just like with the different forms of curcumin, sun fiber is a product that is sold in various brands. I've listed a couple here. One is called Tomorrow's Nutrition, and the other one is Perfect Pass. But this is a way to, boost those, prebiotic fibers to get the short-chain fatty acids, and especially if you struggle with constipation, this could be a good option. Or if you have trouble getting as much fiber in the diet as possible, that's another good way. Yes.
On how many grams of fiber we should get every day, and do you think we can get that from food?
Yes, no, I definitely think it's possible through food. Like I said in my talk last night, the ideal is if you can get 10 servings of fruits and vegetables combined in a day, that for sure will meet the fiber needs. And then, yeah, it's definitely possible through food, for sure, yes.
I've tried different fibers,
Mm-hmm.
and I start slow, and my stomach is always so upset
Mm-hmm.
after like over a week of trying them, so I ditched them. Is that normal, or what?
Have you tried this sun fiber?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay. All right. Some people are very sensitive to fibers, and in those cases, usually I find they can tolerate the sun fiber. So you might want to try that if you haven't already. And then you would want to start with just like sprinkling a few, sprinkles, like really slow, very slowly, super slow, yeah. And then, yep. Oh, yes, go ahead. Generally, yes. Yeah. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Oh, mushrooms. So yes, a big fan of them. Generally, especially the Asian mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, maitake mushrooms, reishi. Very good for the immune system. Very good for the gut microbiome. I think, also in Ayurveda, there's some concern that mushrooms are tamasic. So for that reason, it's not recommended in certain, if you're in a deep spiritual practice. But for general health, mushrooms are very beneficial. Yep. And then the fermented foods, like, for example, kimchi has a ability to break down toxins. They found in this study, so the BPA toxin is broken down by the kimchi bacteria, which is the Korean fermented cabbage dish. That is very, so all of these things in the gut foods can help break down toxins. That's another important way to detoxify, especially the fermented foods. So we really kind of rely on our good bacteria for detoxification, which is why it's so important to keep them healthy, and that's going to be tonight's talk. Okay, but let's talk a little bit more about the prebiotic foods. So the phase 2 diet is the long-term diet I recommend, which is a nutrient-dense diet. with prebiotic foods, fermented foods, and increased plant diversity. So like I said last night, our ancestors evolved eating more than 100 different plant foods every week, and each plant food has different types of nutrients that feed different types of bacteria in the microbiome, and that's very important for the diversity. So I recommend trying to eat at least 30 to 40 different types of plant foods in a week. It doesn't have to be every day, but total in a week, the general pattern, including plenty of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, spices. And optimal level for fruits and vegetables for longevity is 10 servings per day combined of fruits and vegetables. Yes. Right. Nuts, seeds, yeah. Yeah, I think so, yes. Okay. Okay, so now the prebiotic foods. So these are some tables from my book where I go through different categories of foods, like we look at fruits and go through what are the highest polyphenols, which are the prebiotics that are important. So we all know blueberries are very healthy, but black elderberry is the highest source of polyphenols, and then black currant as well is a close second. And of course, plums, cherries, other berries as well. Black elderberry, sometimes I can find it in a farmer's market. Often dried black elderberry is available online, like Amazon, or we buy that quite a lot to make teas and infusions. So yeah, getting the polyphenols in the diet is very important, prebiotics for the good bacteria. And then looking at nuts and seeds, so ground flaxseed is the highest, but then chestnuts are a close second, so higher than almonds and other beans we think of as healthy. And chestnuts usually we think of as like a holiday food, but very high. I think they should be consumed year-round because they're so high in the polyphenols that are good for the microbiome. And then here's some more prebiotic foods you may not be aware of. So inulin-rich foods include leeks and jicama, which is an excellent vegetable. Galacto-oligosaccharides are found in black beans and Jerusalem artichoke. Regular artichokes as well are great. Jerusalem artichoke is a subtype, which is especially high in the prebiotics. And then there's resistant starch, which there's 3 different types. Type 1 is found in millet and oatmeal as well. Type 2 in plantains, green bananas, another good source. Type 3 is in the cooked and chilled potatoes. So has anyone heard of this, the cooked and chilled potatoes as a way to get resistant starch? Yes, some people have. Okay. So what it is basically that it works for rice too, for white rice, cooked and chilled rice. So with potatoes, yeah, you just cook them any way, boiled, baked, whatever, but then put them in the refrigerator for at least 12 hours. And then during that time, they make this retrograde starch called resistant starch, which is especially good for the gut bacteria and also lowers the glycemic index, meaning how high your blood sugar goes from eating them. So the next day, you can reheat it, no problem, and then you get a lot more benefits. So the cooked and chilled for potatoes and rice work better that way for the prebiotics. And then arabinogalactans are found in radish and coconut as well as excellent source. And then fermented foods. So this was a study from Stanford where they took adults and they had them for about 6 weeks just eat more fermented foods. They didn't say which ones. They just said eat a variety of fermented foods, yogurt, sauerkraut, kefir, etc. And then what they found after 6 weeks was these adults had significantly lower inflammation, and they measured their immune system and found like 19 different markers were better in their immune system, immune function. Their gut microbiome was a lot more diverse, better bacterial balance. all from just adding fermented foods to the diet. So that's why that's something I do recommend. It doesn't have to be a big amount, you know, because generally whatever the serving size is, it could be a quarter cup of yogurt or 1 or 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut per meal. Not a large amount, just the consistency, having it regularly is what seems to have the most benefit. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit about rest. So some of the tools for optimizing rest, psychotherapy, counseling are very beneficial, biofeedback potentially, as well as guided imagery. And then mindfulness practice is great. We're going to talk more about meditation in the next few slides. Deep breathing, so diaphragmatic breathing, and hypnosis as well. So a lot of tools out there, a lot of ways to work on stress. But we know meditation changes the brain structure. So research found that, so in your brain you have gray matter and white matter. There are 2 types of brain matter. And meditation increases both the gray matter and also the white matter. The both expand. So literally they're increasing the size of the brain. It increases the size of the prefrontal cortex as well as the hippocampus. So the areas involved in, you know, thinking, memory, learning, all those things. And then meditation shrinks the amygdala. So this is the fear center of the brain, the reactivity, the kind of fight or flight response. So this is how meditation reduces the stress reactivity, enhances an emotional skillfulness. So it's literally growing your brain in all the beneficial areas and then shrinking the fear centers of the brain. And then also, meditation has been shown to lower cortisol levels and so cortisol is a stress hormone, but it's associated with the weight gain, storing fat in the abdomen area, so belly fat. So meditation lowers the cortisol levels. And then C-reactive protein is a blood marker of inflammation, not just autoimmune disease, but most chronic diseases. Meditation lowers that. So it lowers inflammation and may help with weight loss by down-regulating the cortisol, the stress hormones. And then finally, it increases the beneficial gamma brain waves. Interesting study recently was done. They found in new meditators, like the first or second time they're doing it, they're already seeing these changes because the brain waves change pretty quickly. You start meditation, if you're doing it even the first time, second time, they found the changes in the brain waves. And then also, it reduces something called age-related atrophy, which is, as we all age, we lose brain cells and the brain shrinks, what's called atrophy. But meditation seems to be like a vaccine that prevents that. It reduces those negative effects of aging on the brain. So for longevity with healthy brain aging, I think meditation is really the best strategy. Okay, so just to review, we're getting towards the end here. So first, implementing the 5 steps, addressing toxins, infections, the gut, eating right, and then optimizing rest. So then what do you do next, right? So you kind of go through this protocol, address these 5 drivers of inflammation, removing those kind of like levers that are driving inflammation. So then you can use other tools like fasting. Very powerful tool. So fasting has been shown to modulate the immune system. Rheumatoid arthritis patients, that's one of the first things I advise to them is a trial of fasting. Often it can be really helpful. Psoriasis, so skin diseases. Study of patients who were fasting during Ramadan, the Muslim month, found that the skin improved during that time. And they were doing intermittent fasting, so eating in a 6-hour window, fasting for about 18 hours per day. Same with multiple sclerosis. This is something they studied, the fasting mimicking diet, FMD. It's a 5-day low-calorie diet that's designed to like mimic the benefits of fasting. Very beneficial in autoimmunity. And then we do have to think about there are racial and ethnic disparities in autoimmune diseases. So minority populations have been shown to have poorer outcomes. So for example, with lupus, it was shown that non-white women die from lupus about 13 years younger on average. So these are some important factors to be aware of in terms of disparities. And part of it could be some disparities in the root causes. So there may be differential exposure to toxins, depending on certain populations more exposed to agricultural chemicals or certain skincare products. So in African American women, there's certain hair straightening products, skin lightening creams, which were found to have high levels of toxins. So very important to think about the community aspects, the racial and ethnic disparities as well. So this was a population in New York called the Buffalo Lupus Project, that there was a hazardous waste site near a low-income community which was exposing those residents to toxins, and they had a 7 times higher risk of developing lupus and other autoimmune diseases. Fortunately, the community came together and cleaned up the site, and this was taken care of, but just to show that it's very important for vulnerable populations. And some other tools, so after you complete the I.G.E.R protocol, so these are under the guidance of a practitioner, but there's something called low-dose naltrexone, which is a compounded medication made in a compounding pharmacy that can lower inflammation. There's laser light therapy or red light therapy that can be really beneficial. Pulsed electromagnetic field therapy can be very powerful. That's for pain and inflammation. You can look at hormones, and of course, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, they're complete systems in and of themselves. Yeah, so I'll stop there, and yeah, thank you for your time, and you can, yeah, thanks. So you can connect with me on social media. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as well as at DOCTORAKIL. So happy to take any questions there might be.
I know that you were talking about rice and potatoes based what is helpful.
Yep.
Does that apply to quinoa?
For quinoa?
Yeah, to do the same, cook it and then put it in the fridge and eat it the next day.
Oh, that's a good question. It hasn't been studied, so we don't know for sure, but I think it probably should work, because it's similar in property.
Different, one has protein and rice has protein.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of quinoa. I think it's excellent because it's a legume and not really a grain, but yeah, no problems with quinoa.
You had mentioned the rice and holding it for 12 hours, but I read somewhere that, like in Japan, they don't allow cooked rice, to sit around for more than 24 hours because it gets, like it molds really easily.
Okay.
And that they've actually sort of outlawed keeping rice more than 24 hours once it's cooked. Have you heard that, or?
Well, are they refrigerating it, or is it just room temperature then? Because, oh, well, if you refrigerate rice, it's not going to get molded in 24 hours. That's probably room temperature. But yeah, if you refrigerate it, I don't think there should be an issue. Yeah.
What do you think of CBD?
Oh, potentially very helpful. Yeah, good for sleep, good for inflammation. Topical can be used as well as oral. So, yeah, yes.
What about vitamins? Do you recommend vitamins at all?
Well, I recommend, getting most of the nutrients through the diet as much as possible. But sometimes it can be hard to completely get everything. So like a multivitamin, it can be helpful in that case to fill in the gaps with what's not in the diet.
I hear that even though we eat a good diet, the
Yep.
nutrients on the ground are
Yes.
not as good as they were
Right.
hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I write about that in my book as well. Yeah, that's a big issue, which is why like the rates of vitamin deficiency are so high now. Even 92% of adults in the U.S. are deficient in at least one vitamin. So it's very different than 100 years ago when the food supply was a lot more rich in vitamins. So yes.
I was curious about the beneficial microbiota in the gut.
Yes.
It seems like
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think with the bacteria, their primary food is the prebiotics and the fiber, and so that is sufficient if you have a generally healthy person and they're eating, if they're getting those 10 servings a day of fruits and vegetables, you know, all the plant diversity, 40 different plant foods in a week. I think through those foods, absolutely can support a generally healthy person. Yes, yeah. Yes, in the back.
Thank you for a great talk. You said initially that Europe is much more stringent with toxin control.
Right.
Are there any studies to show whether autoimmune disease is less prevalent in Europe than in the US?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so unfortunately, because with autoimmune disease, it's not just toxins, so it's a lot of these other factors too, like the food supply, the infections and stress and all those things. There are, and also one of the thoughts about in certain like Scandinavian countries, there's higher rates of multiple sclerosis, autoimmune disease, less sunlight, less vitamin D is thought to be a factor. Which is a really important factor. So it seems like that difference is not enough to lower autoimmune disease in Europe, but it's still better than what we're doing in the US. So.
Interesting to link in with the population studies
Yes.
in the UK that inspected us. It's very similar.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, no, that's true. But it's because autoimmune disease is not caused by just the one factor. It's all of these 5 factors that are, and other factors too. So, yeah. Yes, there was a hand. Oh.
Where does cancer factor into, you know, your autoimmune? Like, is the autoimmune more the precursors to the cancers as well, or how do you see?
Yeah, I mean, most autoimmune diseases have an increased risk of developing cancer later, and then cancer, I think, is a disease of the immune system because your immune system is supposed to detect the cancers and kill them at an early stage, and it's doing that constantly. And so, I definitely think there's a lot of overlap with the conditions.
And if you already have cancer or going through chemo or whatever,
Yeah.
how would you navigate somebody through that? Differently in the book, or?
No, I mean, I think a lot of the same things apply. Especially a big fan of mushrooms because of their anti-cancer effect, like the shiitake, maitake, reishi, all the Asian mushrooms. But I think the same, yeah, working on the gut, working on stress, it's a lot of the same factors. Yeah, yeah. Yes, was there a hand in the back somewhere? Oh, yes.
Question related to the talk you gave last night. And
Sure.
thank you for today and yesterday. You were amazing.
Oh, sure, thank you.
You mentioned briefly dirty 10 yesterday,
Mhm.
and could you let us know what they are? And is it the group that we should make sure we eat organic because they accumulate more heavy metals? Or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, I couldn't hear. Tell about what? Tell you more.
The
Oh, the Dirty Dozen?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. So, yeah, so this is a great resource for eating organic. It's the Environmental Working Group, which is a nonprofit that is ewg.org. So they published this, which is widely available online, called the Dirty Dozen, which is the 12 vegetables and fruits with the highest pesticide residues where you should choose organic. And then the Clean 15 are the 15 that are lowest, where you can choose non-organic and be okay. So that's a great resource that I recommend everyone. Yes, Environmental Working Group, which is ewg.org. Yep. They also review cosmetics, skincare products, and all those things for the toxin level. So it's a great resource to find a good sunscreen, find a good lotion. All of those things are reviewed there. So. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time. So hope to see many of you tonight when I'm talking about the microbiome.